There is some suggestion of that. I can't say for sure if they learned it from the Europeans or not. But the Indians did get something from the Europeans that made it easier, and what they got was iron. Steel, iron to make different tomahawks with. And a metal tomahawk works a heck of a lot better than a stone. And it's also one of the reasons the Indians didn't cut down as many trees. You ever try to cut down a tree with a stone axe? It doesn't work very well. Okay? That's why a lot of Indians, instead of cutting down the trees, would just kill them and then just use the ground after the trees, the leaves had gone off. Now, in this area, there are two major confrontations. One is in 1777, and that's the people of that time call it the Bloody Year of the Three Sevens. And you're familiar with some of the events of that period, because if you've been up on National Road, Route 40, and you get to the top of Wheeling Hill, you'll see the statue of, of the Indian and the commemoration for McCulloch's Leap. Okay, that took place in 1777 because that's the first siege of Fort Henry in September of 1777. In the same month, in fact just a couple of days later, you have the second big event of that year, and that's, for those of you from the Marshall County area, what's called Foreman's Massacre, which was a ambush of some settlers of some militia down in what's that area south of McMecken, between McMecken and Glendale, in what's called the Narrows. It's not a heck of a lot wider now than it was then, but wider enough. Now let me try to give you some insights, because there is a real interest in early history of this area. Joe Roxby, who is a retired policeman and now a magistrate, has written some very good books. He had a good teacher. I don't know who that was. I didn't teach him anything like that. He's done a remarkable job. The whole Fort Henry days, Ann Foreman, who has done a lot, if you've ever seen Ann's paintings, C.C. Rose has done a lot of paintings of Indians from that period. And it's something in Wheeling, almost everybody's heard of Samuel McCulloch. Everybody's heard of Betty Zane. Now, there are lots of other things that we could add now they haven't heard of. But those early generations, that early pioneer spirit, those are the people that we say, wow, they came in here and they tamed the wilderness. Well, what was it like? What was this wilderness like? Here's a description of Wheeling that appeared in an 1831 book. And the narrative's called The Hunter's Tale. And this is what he wrote. The Zane family built a fort amidst the plain on which the city now stands. The fort was the outpost of civilization. The plain, narrow and darkened by streets and underwood, was overshadowed by that hill, steep and impeding with forest. That creek wounded its shady stream around that sharp and rocky ledge, gliding into the mighty Ohio, itself an emblem of savage majesty. Beyond Wheeling Island there rose bold and blackened another forest. This was the frontier, along which the red and the pale warriors met, and often met in single and unwitnessed combat. Pretty bad stuff. Well, in September of 1777, the Indians decided to try to attack Fort Henry. And they did, and they laid siege to Fort Henry. And the word went out that the siege was being, undertaken. They went out to the various forts, There was a group that will come down from Weirton, or from what's Hollidays Cove. They will actually come down in large canoes. They get here too late. The thing's already over. It doesn't last very long. Most wars don't. Most of these famous battles, like the gunfight at the OK Corral, you know how long that lasted? Less than a minute. Okay? Custer's last stand, 25 to 30 minutes. It's done. Okay? And then they send out the notice to what's called Fort Van Meter, which of course is right up the road in what's now Clinton, West Virginia. Those of you who are not familiar with Clinton, if you've ever been on the road, GC&P Road, and if you don't know what GC&P stands for, the C is Clinton. Okay? Now, so the Indians are besieging us, and really, there aren't that many people in the fort, but you have an advantage. You're in a fort. Okay? And it's a substantial fort. We don't really know what it looks like, because nobody took a picture of it. Well, they didn't have photography. Nobody drew it. So anyhow, they're in the fort. Samuel McCulloch from Fort Van Meter rides down, and they're riding down, and the fort is about where Guerrero Music is, up there, you know, where the Stones Alley comes out. Now, keep this in mind. The river in 1777 is not nearly as high as it is today. And the hill looks even steeper because as you go down Market Street to the south, to the creek, a lot of that has been built up over the years, so it's maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I'm not sure how long, higher. Remember, human beings can change what the environment looks like. So where they put that fort was strategic, because gives you view of the river, it's far enough away from the hill, so you can't fire down into it, as opposed to, you ever been to Fort Necessity? See where Washington put the Fort? George, that's, you know, they can shoot down into the fort. Well, he's 21 years old. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. So anyhow, they're riding into the fort. Okay. And they open the doors to get in the fort, and everybody gets in, of course, except McCulloch. Okay. Now, I'm going to read to you. This is what passes for history. This comes from Peter Boyd's History of the Panhandle, 1926. Somewhere along in there. And it's fun to read. This is what happened. While the enemy was pressing the siege at Wheeling in 1777, Major McCulloch, at the head of 40 mounted men from Short Creek, made their appearances in front, the gates of which were joyously opened for him. See, a historian would say, how do you know it's joyous? Simultaneous with the appearance of McCulloch's men, reappeared the enemy, and a rush was made to cut off some of the members from the party. All, however, succeeded in getting in except the gallant major. Not just the major, the gallant, who, anxious for the safety of his men, held back until his last chance was entirely cut off. And finding himself surrounded by savages, see, no political correctness. Savages. He rode at full speed in the direction of the hill. The enemy, with exulting yells, followed close in pursuit, not doubting that they would capture one of whom all other men they preferred to wreak their vengeance upon. The Indians drove the major to the summit of a lofty hill which overlooks the present city of Wheeling. Knowing their relentless hostility toward himself, he strained every muscle of his noble steed to gain the summit. See, we've upgraded the horse. Could be a mare. No. Could be a gelding. No, it's a noble steed. And then escape along the brow of the hill toward Fort Van Meter. At length he gained the top of the hill, galloping ahead of his pursuers, rejoicing in his lucky escape. As he gained the point of the hill near where the old Cumberland Road crosses